have to perform then the Mumford surgery itself. So now we're starting to work underneath the AC joint. I'm working for the anterior portal. Now we are seeing the very tip of the distal clavicle. We can see a very nice and a very big spur in the very inferior part of the distal clavicle. Now we are starting to cut it with the burr. We can see that we are removing the very inferior part of the distal clavicle. And once I remove all the inferior part of the distal clavicle, my preferred technique is to enter with a Kirschner wire from anterior to posterior. This is what we are doing now, and that Kirschner wire is going to guide my scope to enter in the very posterior part of the AC joint. So now we are entering in the very posterior part of the AC joint. The acromion is on the right side, the distal clavicle is on the left side, and this is the best way, in my opinion, to achieve the very superior parts of all the remaining bone in the distal part of the clavicle. Now we are working for the anterior portal and removing all the bone that was left in the anterior superior part of the distal clavicle. Now all that bone was removed. We are using a soft shaver just to have a very clear view of the medial part of the acromion. We are removing the AC joint capsule. We are seeing the acromion on the right and the very distal part of the clavicle on the left. Now we are using the shaver to measure the interval that we had already created. It was about 4 to 5 millimeters. This is another way to measure it. We are entering with a spinal needle from the upper part of the AC joint. Now we are palpating the acromion on the right and the distal clavicle on the left. We can see that a very nice space was already created at that moment, but I always like to perform a very safe interval. So now we are still removing the most upper part of the distal clavicle, working for the anterior portal. This is another image with a little more light, and we can see very clearly the AC superior ligament in the upper part of the video. But I always like to enter in the very anterior part of the AC joint too. This is what we are doing now. So now we are seeing the clavicle on the right part and the acromion on the left part. And this is the best way, in my opinion, to achieve the very posterior superior part of the distal bony in the distal clavicle. Now we are removing what was left in the posterior superior part of the distal clavicle, and we are clearly seeing the AC superior ligament, and we are now palpating it with an arthroscopic probe. We are palpating it just to be sure that no bone was left in the middle of the AC superior ligament, and in this case it was absolutely okay. And we are seeing the acromion on the left part of the video, the distal clavicle on the right part of the video. Now we are feeling the interval with a spinal needle, the acromion on the left, the distal clavicle on the right, and we can clearly see that we had created quite an interval, about 1 centimeter, and at that moment the surgery was then finally finished.